Chosen one, what if I told you that every tear you shed in silence was recorded in a ledger you cannot see? That every night you survived alone, every betrayal you endured without retaliation, every loss that nearly destroyed you, all of it was being documented in realms beyond human perception. The suffering you thought was meaningless, the delays that felt like abandonment, the pain that nobody acknowledged, none of it was random. You have been living through a cosmic operation that required your endurance, your silence, and your survival. While the world moved on and others advanced around you, you were being held in place for reasons that had nothing to do with punishment and everything to do with preparation. Right now, in this moment, ancient agreements are being activated. Spiritual debts accumulated over years of your suffering are being called in for settlement. Favor is not coming to you as a gift or a blessing. It is being released as repayment, as recompense, as what you are legally owed by divine law. The forces that delayed you have run out of time. The enemies that misread your endurance have exhausted their resources. And heaven itself has issued final clearance for what is about to touch your life. This is not motivation. This is a classified briefing. You are about to be repaid. Chosen one, like this video, subscribe, and comment, I am ready for a powerful surprise. There exists a system of accounting that operates beyond the limitations of human morality and religious sentimentality. This system does not traffic in hope or faith as emotional commodities. It deals in precision, in documentation, in the meticulous recording of what was taken from you and what is owed in return. Ancient record keepers, entities whose function predates the foundations you were taught to believe in, have been marking every loss you sustained, not as punishment for hidden sin, not as consequences of poor choices or lack of faith, but as unpaid spiritual debt, obligations that accumulate interest in dimensions where time moves differently and justice operates with mathematical certainty. You have lived through years where it seemed no one was listening, where your prayers felt like they dissolved into silence, where your efforts produced no visible results, and your sacrifices went unacknowledged by everyone around you. You were told to have faith, to keep believing, to trust the process. But what you were never told is that the silence was not neglect. It was the accounting phase. Every injustice you suffered was being logged. Every wound inflicted upon you was being calculated with forensic accuracy. The emotional devastation you barely survived, the opportunities stolen from you, the relationships that betrayed you, the health you lost, the years that vanished while you waited. All of it was recorded as collateral for what is now being returned. This is where human religion fails to explain what is actually happening in your life. You were taught that blessings come from worthiness, that favor is a reward for good behavior, that prosperity arrives because you prayed correctly or believed hard enough. But what is happening to you now has nothing to do with any of that. This is not generosity. This is not divine benevolence, deciding randomly to smile upon you. This is recompense enforced by divine law that operates whether you understand it or not, whether you believe in it or not, whether religious leaders acknowledge it or not. The forces governing your life right now are responding to contractual obligations written into the fabric of your existence before you took your first breath. You have crossed thresholds of suffering that trigger automatic releases of compensation. The system does not ask how you feel about it. It does not require your faith to be strong or your understanding to be complete. It simply executes what is legally required. And what is legally required right now is that you be repaid for what you endured. The ledger has been balanced. The accounting phase is complete. Settlement has been authorized. What you are about to experience will not feel like the small blessings religious communities celebrate. It will not arrive as gentle encouragement or mild improvement. It will come as sudden, disproportionate, and undeniable favor, the kind that makes no sense to observers, that violates the patterns they expected your life to follow, that contradicts every narrative people constructed about your future. Because this favor is not coming from human systems or natural processes. It is being released from realms where debts are paid in full, where justice is not symbolic but actual, where what was taken must be restored with increase. You are not being given a blessing. You are being repaid what you are owed. And the universe does not negotiate its debts. You have interpreted the delays in your life as evidence of failure, as proof that you did something wrong, that you lack what others possess, that you are being punished for sins you cannot identify or mistakes you cannot remember making. The religious industrial complex taught you to see delay as a test of patience, a character-building season, a mysterious divine process that would make sense eventually if you just kept believing. But that interpretation is a distortion designed to keep you passive while something far more strategic was occurring. Time did not simply pass slowly in your life. Time stalled. It froze around specific areas of your existence while everyone else seemed to move forward at normal speed. You watched others get promoted, get married, launch businesses, achieve dreams, build families, accumulate wealth, all while you remained locked in place, struggling with the same problems year after year, unable to break through barriers that seemed invisible but absolute. This was not random. This was not divine neglect or spiritual punishment. The delay was a weapon deployed in your favor, though it felt like torture while you lived through it. Forces with knowledge of your true assignment needed you unformed but intact. They needed you to survive long enough to reach this moment without being corrupted, compromised, or co-opted by systems that would have destroyed what you carry. If favor had arrived earlier in your journey, it would have been intercepted. The version of you that existed 5 years ago, 10 years ago, was not protected enough to handle what is coming now. You would have been vulnerable to manipulation, to theft, to dilution of purpose, by people who would have attached themselves to your elevation for parasitic reasons. The delay did something to you that success could never accomplish. It hardened your perception. It stripped away your dependency on human validation, on crowd approval, on the need to be understood by people who will never operate at your frequency. You learned to survive in isolation, to make decisions without consensus, to stand in your truth even when everyone around you insisted you were wrong. The delay sharpened your discernment to supernatural levels. You can now detect lies before they are fully spoken. You can sense agendas beneath polite words. You can identify wolves in sheep's clothing within seconds of encounter. This was not something you could learn in classrooms or from mentors. It could only be forged through prolonged exposure to betrayal, disappointment, and the necessity of trusting your inner knowing above all external voices. But here is what makes the delay a weapon, rather than merely a waiting period. Your enemies misunderstood what was happening. They interpreted your stillness as defeat. They assumed your lack of visible progress meant you were finished, irrelevant, no longer a threat to their plans or position. And in their arrogance, they exposed themselves. They stopped hiding their intentions. They revealed their true nature. They invested resources, time, and energy trying to break what was already unbreakable, trying to destroy what had been designed to survive everything they could inflict. They exhausted themselves attacking a version of you that was being hardened with every blow they delivered. And now, at the exact moment when their strength is depleted and their strategies have failed, favor arrives. Not when you were weak and they were strong. Not when they could still interfere or sabotage what is being released to you. But now, when the battlefield has been cleared, when their jurisdiction over your life has expired, when their assigned window to stop you has closed. The delay ensured that when favor finally moves, nothing and no one can stand in its path. What is coming to you now arrives with legal clearance, spiritual authorization, and zero opposition. Because the delay was never about making you wait. It was about making sure you would still be standing when the enemies who tried to stop you were gone. Your adversaries, both visible and invisible, made a calculation error of catastrophic proportions. They observed your endurance and interpreted it through their own framework of weakness. They saw you continue to survive betrayal, loss, isolation, and pain without breaking completely. And they concluded you were simply too weak to fight back, too damaged to be a threat, too defeated to ever recover. This interpretation was not just wrong. It was a fatal analytical error that will cost them everything they invested in trying to destroy you. Because what they mistook for passive suffering was actually something far more dangerous to their agenda. Every moment you survived quietly, every day you chose to keep going despite having every reason to quit, every betrayal you absorbed without retaliating, every loss you endured without becoming bitter, all of it was rewiring your authority in realms they cannot access or control. Human observers only see the surface level of suffering. They see tears, struggle, isolation, defeat. But in dimensions where power is actually allocated and authority is actually assigned, something entirely different was being recorded. Your emotional endurance, under conditions designed to break you, was being logged as evidence of capacity. Not worthiness, not righteousness. Capacity, the ability to carry weight that others cannot bear. The ability to maintain integrity under pressure that corrupts everyone else. The ability to survive in environments where survival should be impossible. This capacity does not earn you favor. It qualifies you for assignments that require favor to function at levels most people will never access. What looked to your enemies like emotional erosion, like the slow dismantling of your spirit, like the gradual defeat of your hope. All of it was actually pressure-forged command being installed into your energetic structure. Think of how diamonds are formed, not through gentle encouragement or positive thinking or motivational speeches, through immense pressure applied over extended time in conditions of total isolation. The same carbon that becomes coal under lesser pressure becomes diamond under greater pressure. Your suffering was not punishment. It was the forging process required to transform you from someone who hopes for authority into someone who commands it without needing permission, validation, or audience. Your enemies invested massive resources into breaking you because they understood, even if only instinctively, that if you survived what they inflicted, you would emerge as a threat they could no longer control. They threw everything at you. Betrayal from trusted allies, financial devastation, health crises, relational destruction, public humiliation, private agony. Year after year of compounding loss designed to force you into despair, bitterness, or compromise. They needed you to either die, give up, or become corrupted, because any of those outcomes would neutralize you permanently. But you did none of those things. You survived. You maintained your integrity. You refused to become what they tried to make you. and now they face a problem they did not anticipate. Favor is being released to someone they already used their best weapons against, someone they already tried to destroy and failed, someone who knows their tactics, understands their strategies, and cannot be manipulated by their schemes because you have already survived everything they have. The favor coming to you now arrives in the hands of someone they can no longer touch, can no longer influence, can no longer stop, because resistance has exhausted itself. They spent their ammunition, they played their cards, they used their time, and you are still here, still standing, still intact. The enemy misread your suffering as weakness, and that misreading just cost them the war. There are agreements written into the foundation of your existence that you did not negotiate and do not consciously remember. These are not the covenants religious institutions teach about, not contracts you enter through ritual or ceremony or declaration of faith. These are ancient binding agreements embedded into your spiritual DNA before you took form in this reality, clauses that remain dormant until specific conditions are met. Your suffering was not random chaos or divine punishment. It was the triggering mechanism for promises that only activate under prolonged injustice and restraint. You have unknowingly crossed thresholds others quit before reaching, endured conditions that disqualify most people before completion, survived tests that were designed to filter out everyone except those assigned to carry what comes next. Religious frameworks teach you that promises are activated by faith, by prayer, by obedience, by correct belief. But the covenants operating in your life right now have nothing to do with any of that. They respond to endurance under specific conditions, not the endurance of mild discomfort or temporary inconvenience. The endurance of prolonged injustice that violates every principle you were taught about how life should work. The endurance of restraint when you had the power to retaliate but chose not to. The endurance of isolation when you could have compromised your integrity for community but refused. The endurance of waiting when everyone around you insisted you should give up and move on. These are not tests of patience. They are authentication protocols, systems checking whether you are who your spiritual documentation claims you are, whether you will hold the line when there is no witness, no reward, no acknowledgement, whether you will maintain integrity when corruption would be easier and more profitable, whether you will continue forward when every logical assessment says retreat is the only rational option. Most people never reach these thresholds because they quit long before the conditions become severe enough to trigger the deeper covenants. They tap out when suffering reaches a certain level of intensity or duration. They compromise when isolation becomes too painful. They abandon their path when delay exceeds their patience. But you did not quit. You crossed thresholds written into ancient contracts that most humans never activate because they do not survive long enough or maintain integrity thoroughly enough to reach the activation point. And here is what you need to understand about how these covenants function. Heaven does not reward your pain. Religious systems lie to you about this, telling you that suffering itself is virtuous, that God is pleased by your endurance as if you are earning favor through misery. That is manipulation designed to keep you passive in the face of injustice. The truth is far more mechanical and far more powerful. Heaven responds to covenant compliance. When you unknowingly fulfill the conditions written into these ancient agreements, automatic releases are triggered, not because heaven feels sorry for you, not because your faith was finally strong enough, but because the contract is now enforceable. What is being released to you now was already yours. It was held in escrow. waiting for you to survive specific conditions that would prove you capable of carrying what it unlocks. The favor coming is not a reward. It is not a blessing. It is the execution of terms written before you were born, activated by your endurance, released because you proved you are who the documentation said you were. This is not about deserving. This is about qualifying. And you have qualified for levels of favor that most people will never see because they will never endure what you endured. The covenant has been activated. The terms are being executed. What was promised is now being delivered. While you watched others receive public recognition, advance in careers, gain social media followings, build visible empires, and celebrate achievements that everyone could see, you were being reassigned in rooms you did not know existed. Your isolation was never demotion. It was classification upgrade. Access was restricted around you, not because you were failing, but because you were being moved into levels where public visibility would compromise operational security. This is a concept most people never encounter because they remain in systems where advancement is measured by external validation, where progress is defined by how many people know your name, where success means being seen by crowds who do not understand what you carry. But you were pulled out of that system, removed from public ladders of advancement, stripped of the audiences and platforms and recognition that others use to measure worth. It felt like exile, like punishment, like being forgotten while everyone else moved forward. But in structures where real power operates, where actual authority is allocated, where assignments that shape realms are distributed, you are being promoted through clearance levels that have nothing to do with human perception. Your isolation was containment, not to limit you, but to protect what was being built in you from interference, from contamination, from the corruption that destroys everyone who builds in public before they are ready. Think about classified operations in intelligence agencies. The most important operatives are not the ones giving press conferences or appearing in documentaries. They are the ones no one knows exist, the ones whose work cannot be discussed, whose achievements cannot be celebrated, whose impact remains hidden because revelation would compromise everything they are assigned to accomplish. You have been living in spiritual classification, moved into assignment levels where visibility would have been dangerous, where public knowledge of what you carry would have made you a target for forces that were already trying to destroy you. The silence around your life was not neglect. It was operational security. And here is what changes now. Favor follows rank, not visibility. The favor being released to you is not coming because you finally got noticed by the right people, or because your social media algorithm changed, or because you marketed yourself correctly. It is coming because of the position you hold in structures most people cannot perceive. You are being compensated according to rank, not appearance. The level of favor about to manifest in your life will confuse everyone who judged you by what they could see, who wrote you off because you had no platform, who dismissed you because you had no public credibility. They measured you by systems you were no longer operating in. What is about to become visible in your life will not make sense to observers using conventional metrics of success. The doors that open, the resources that flow, the access that materializes, the opportunities that manifest, none of it will follow patterns they recognize or timelines they can predict, because it is not coming through human systems or natural processes. It is coming through authorization channels connected to the rank you hold in dimensions they do not know exist. You are promoted in silence. You are about to be compensated in public, and there is nothing anyone can do to stop what has been authorized at levels they cannot access, cannot influence, and cannot understand. People looked at your life and concluded your story prematurely. They assessed your struggles and decided you were finished. They observed your isolation and determined you were rejected. They watched your delays and announced you were disqualified. They spoke narratives over you that were not true, assigned meanings to your circumstances that were false, and crafted explanations for your suffering that completely misread what was actually happening. And every single one of those false judgments was recorded, not in journals or social media posts, in realms where false testimony generates spiritual liability, where bearing false witness against someone carries consequences that compound over time, where speaking lies over another person's destiny creates debts that must eventually be paid. You were allowed to be misunderstood. This was not accidental. It was strategic. False witnesses needed to expose themselves by speaking confidently about things they did not understand, by declaring conclusions about your future they had no authority to make, by passing judgment on your character based on limited information filtered through their own brokenness. Every person who wrote you off, who dismissed your potential, who celebrated your struggles, who spread rumors about why you were suffering, all of them created spiritual liabilities they do not yet comprehend. They testified falsely. And false testimony does not go unanswered in systems where justice operates with precision. What you must understand is that vindication is not emotional satisfaction. It is not about watching people who hurt you suffer consequences or getting apologies from those who misjudged you. Vindication is structural. It is the correction of false narratives through undeniable manifestation of truth. When favor arrives in your life now, it will not arrive quietly or subtly. It will manifest in ways that publicly contradict every private accusation ever spoken against you. The people who said you would never recover will watch you thrive. The ones who claimed you were cursed will witness you blessed. The ones who insisted you were finished will see you beginning, not because you need their validation, but because truth demands public correction when lies have been spoken publicly. This is not about revenge. Revenge is emotional and temporary. This is about the restoration of accurate testimony, the universe itself correcting false narratives by manifesting evidence that contradicts every lie told about your future. The favor coming to you now serves multiple purposes. Yes, it compensates you for what you endured, but it also functions as living proof that everyone who judged you incorrectly was operating from corrupted perception, from limited understanding, from agendas that colored their ability to see truth. Your elevation will be the evidence that refutes their testimony. And here is what makes this particularly powerful. You do not have to defend yourself. You do not have to argue with people who misunderstood you or convince anyone who wrote you off that they were wrong. The favor itself will speak. It will manifest in forms so undeniable, so disproportionate to your previous circumstances, so clearly supernatural in origin that no one will be able to craft alternative explanations that hold up under scrutiny. The blessing will be its own testimony. The elevation will be its own defense. And every false witness will be forced to reconcile their words with the reality now manifesting in your life. This is not you proving them wrong. This is truth, correcting the record through manifestation, so obvious that denial becomes impossible. Your endurance exceeded projections. Systems designed to measure human capacity, to predict breaking points, to calculate how much pressure a person can survive before collapse. All of them failed when applied to your life. You survived longer than the models predicted. You maintained integrity under conditions that should have corrupted you. You recovered from losses that should have destroyed you permanently. And this created a problem in dimensions where destiny follows calculated pathways, where fate operates according to established patterns, where outcomes are predicted based on precedent and probability. You broke the pattern. You outlasted the projection. You survived what you were not supposed to survive. Fate itself hesitated, not because it did not know what to do with you, but because your continued existence disrupted timelines built on the assumption of your collapse. Plans were made, resources were allocated, opportunities were scheduled, connections were arranged, all based on calculations that you would reach a breaking point and either quit, compromise, or be destroyed before reaching this moment. But you did not break, you did not quit, you did not compromise. And now, the systems designed to manage your destiny have to recalibrate everything, because you are still here when you should not be, still standing when you should have fallen, still intact when you should be shattered. This recalibration is what you are experiencing right now as favor. It is not just compensation for past suffering. It is the system stabilizing what your survival destabilized. Think of it like this. Imagine a bridge designed to hold a certain amount of weight. Then imagine a force crosses that bridge that exceeds its design capacity, but instead of collapsing, the bridge holds. Engineers now have to rebuild the entire structure to match the reality of what it already proved it could carry. That is what is happening in your life. You proved you could carry weight that was never supposed to touch you. You demonstrated capacity that exceeded what destiny calculated you possessed. And now everything has to be rebuilt to match the reality of who you actually are, rather than who the projections said you would be. This is why the favor coming will feel disproportionate. This is why what manifests next will not make sense to people observing from outside, because you were never meant to endure that much. The system was never designed for someone to survive what you survived and remain functional, let alone maintain integrity and clarity and purpose through it all. Your survival created a debt the universe did not anticipate having to pay. And when systems are forced to compensate for outcomes they did not predict, the compensation is severe. Not as punishment, but as necessary correction to bring external reality into alignment with what you already proved internally. You confused destiny by refusing to be broken by what was designed to break you. You disrupted fate by surviving what fate calculated would destroy you. And now, as the timelines recalibrate and the pathways reorganize and the resources redistribute to match the reality of your endurance, favor is being released not as reward, but as necessary adjustment. The system is compensating for what should have destroyed you, but did not. And that compensation will reshape your entire reality in ways that make it impossible for anyone to keep using old narratives to explain who you are or where you are going. Non-human observers have been monitoring your life with clinical precision. These are not angels in the sentimental religious sense, not demons in the horror movie sense. These are witnesses assigned to track anomalies, to document deviations from expected patterns, to flag cases that fall outside normal parameters of human experience. And your case was flagged, marked as anomalous, classified as requiring special attention, because the data coming from your life did not match the models, did not follow the patterns, did not conform to what happens to most people under similar conditions. Too many recoveries from situations that typically result in permanent damage. Too much restraint in moments when most people retaliate. Too little bitterness, despite enduring betrayals that turn others into monsters. These observers do not operate on emotion. They do not care about your feelings, or your faith, or your worthiness. They track data. They measure responses. They document what happens when specific pressures are applied to specific individuals, and then compare those outcomes to established patterns. And your outcomes confuse them. You kept recovering when the data said you should stay broken. You kept choosing integrity when the pattern said you should compromise. You kept moving forward when precedent said you should quit. Every time they calculated you had reached your limit, you found another level. Every time the models predicted your collapse, you stabilized. Every time the pattern indicated you would become bitter, you remained clear. This created questions in realms where questions trigger investigations. Not to punish you, but to understand what makes you different. What structural anomaly in your design allows you to function under conditions that disable everyone else? What is written into your code that is not written into the standard human template? What are you carrying that most people do not carry? These are not philosophical questions. They are technical assessments with practical implications. Because if you can survive what destroys others, if you can maintain clarity under pressure that corrupts everyone else, if you can function in isolation that drives most people insane, then you are not standard issue. You are something else, something designed for environments and assignments that require capabilities most humans simply do not possess. The favor being released to you now is not personal in the way religious systems teach. It is not God deciding to bless you because you are a good person or because you prayed correctly. The favor is corrective. The system is compensating for what should have destroyed you but did not. Your responses under pressure altered inter-realm expectations about what humans can survive, what they can maintain, what they can carry. And when you alter expectations in dimensions where power is allocated and authority is distributed, adjustments must be made. Resources must be redistributed. Access must be granted. Assignments must be upgraded. Because you proved you can operate at levels that were never supposed to be accessible to someone with your apparent limitations, your visible circumstances, your lack of traditional qualifications. This is not about you earning anything or deserving anything. This is about accurate classification. You are categorized incorrectly based on surface-level assessment. The observers watching your life documented enough evidence to force reclassification. And reclassification triggers automatic releases of favor, resources, access, and authority that match your actual capacity rather than your assumed capacity. What is coming to you now is the system correcting its own error. You were measured by the wrong standards, judged by the wrong metrics, assigned to the wrong category. The Watcher's report corrects that mistake, and the favor flowing from that correction will permanently alter every limitation people tried to impose on your life based on who they thought you were. What you gave up quietly carried greater weight than every public offering you ever witnessed. The dreams you released without ceremony, the relationships you walked away from without explanation, the opportunities you declined because something in your spirit said no, even when logic screamed yes. The parts of yourself you surrendered in private moments of excruciating choice, when no one was watching, and no one would ever know what it cost you. These hidden sacrifices bypass every corruption channel that contaminates public offerings. When you give loudly, when you sacrifice for applause, when you surrender for recognition, intermediaries attach themselves to the transaction. Handlers, religious gatekeepers, systems designed to extract value from your offering before it reaches its intended destination. but what you released in silence, what you let go of without audience, what you surrendered without witness, that moves through channels no one else can access. There is no crowd to impress, so there is no ego contaminating the release. There is no applause to receive, so there is no transaction being measured by human validation. There is no public record, so there are no religious authorities claiming jurisdiction over what you gave. The sacrifices no one noticed count the most, not because hidden suffering is more valuable, but because it is more pure, uncontaminated by the need for acknowledgement, uncorrupted by the desire for recognition, undiluted by the performance required when others are watching. You lost things no one ever noticed, relationships that ended without social media announcements, dreams that died without funeral services, versions of yourself that dissolved without anyone marking their passing, pieces of your heart that shattered in moments no one will ever ask you about. And every single one of those losses was recorded in dimensions where value is measured by purity of intention rather than size of audience. What you gave in private carried exponential weight because it could not be stolen, could not be intercepted, could not be corrupted by the systems that drain public offerings before they reach their destination. This is why the favor being released now will feel disproportionate. This is why what manifests will seem like too much, like more than you asked for, like abundance that does not match the visible price you paid. Because observers only see what you sacrificed publicly. They measure your suffering by what they witnessed, but the return is calculated based on everything you released, including and especially what no one ever saw. The hidden sacrifices generated returns that no intermediary can intercept, no religious system can tax, no spiritual authority can claim percentage of. What returns to you now comes directly, with no handlers taking their cut, no gatekeepers demanding their fee, no systems extracting value before it reaches you. The universe is repaying you for losses no one acknowledged, for sacrifices no one applauded, for surrenders no one witnessed, and because those offerings were pure, uncontaminated by performance or ego or need for validation. The return is pure, undiluted, uncompromised. It will feel disproportionate because human observers are comparing what they see manifesting now to what they saw you sacrifice publicly. But they did not see what you gave in silence. They do not know what you released in private. And the favor coming is calculated based on the full ledger, not the visible portion. What you gave quietly is returning loudly. What you surrendered in secret is manifesting publicly, and there is nothing anyone can do to intercept what was released through channels they never knew existed. Opposition operating against your life was not eternal. It was assigned. Given a window, allocated resources, granted jurisdiction for a specific duration. Your enemies, both human and non-human, operated under the assumption that you would collapse within their assigned time frame. They calculated how long they could sustain the attack. They measured how much pressure they could maintain. They projected when you would reach your breaking point based on how quickly others break under similar conditions. And they paced their assault accordingly, confident that they had more than enough time to accomplish your destruction before their authorization expired. But you outlasted them. You survived past the deadline they were given. You endured beyond the window they were assigned. And now they face a catastrophic problem. Their resources dried up. The weapons they were using no longer have ammunition. The strategies they deployed no longer have power. The authority they operated under has expired. They are standing in your life, holding orders that are no longer valid, wielding power they no longer possess. attempting to enforce jurisdiction they no longer have, and you are still here, still standing, still intact, still moving forward into a future they are no longer authorized to influence. This is not metaphor. This is operational reality in dimensions where authority has expiration dates, where assignments have time limits, where opposition is granted permission to function for specific durations but no longer. Your enemies depended entirely on you giving up first, on you collapsing before their clock ran out. They needed you to be destroyed, corrupted, or disqualified while they still had the power to make that happen. But you survived. You outlasted the window. And the moment their authorization expired, everything changed. The weapons they used against you for years suddenly lost their effectiveness. The people they positioned around you suddenly lost their influence. The barriers they constructed suddenly lost their solidity. What touches you next does so legally, uncontested. This is a phrase with profound implications. When opposition had active jurisdiction, everything trying to reach you had to fight through their interference. Opportunities were blocked, resources were redirected, connections were severed, doors were locked. Not because favor was not trying to reach you, but because forces with temporary authority were legally allowed to block it. But their legal standing has expired. Their temporary jurisdiction is over. Their assigned window has closed. And now, everything that was held back while they had authority is being released with nothing standing in its way. Favor arrives now because resistance no longer has the power to stop it. Not because resistance became weak or tired or lost interest, but because resistance operated under authorization that had an expiration date, and that date has passed. The enemies who celebrated your suffering are still watching your life, but they are watching from outside the walls they used to command. They can see what is happening. They can witness the favor manifesting, but they cannot interfere. They cannot block. They cannot sabotage, because they no longer have jurisdiction. Their clock ran out. Your endurance outlasted their assignment, and now everything they tried to prevent is manifesting without opposition, without interference, without resistance. What is coming to you now is coming legally, with full authorization, uncontested by forces that once had the power to block it, but no longer do. This is not restoration to former status. What you are entering is not a return to who you were before the suffering, not a recovery of what existed before the losses, not a rebuilding of the life you had before everything fell apart. The return phase operates on different principles than restoration. Restoration implies going back to a previous state. But what is happening in your life now is the manifestation of something that never existed before, the arrival of favor that has no precedent in your history, the opening of access to levels you never touched even in your best previous seasons. What was taken from you is not simply being returned, it is being outgrown. Favor does not replace what you lost. It dwarfs it. It makes your former life look like preparation, like training, like the small-scale version you needed to master before being entrusted with the real thing. Think about the difference between a prototype and the final product. The prototype is necessary. It proves the concept works. But no one confuses the prototype with what it was designed to become. Your former life was the prototype. Necessary for what it taught you, essential for how it prepared you, but never intended to be the final form of what you carry. The favor manifesting now is the actual product, the real version, the full-scale manifestation of what your life was always meant to become. What returns comes with added reach, access, and permanence. Reach means your influence touches more people, more systems, more territory than ever before. Not because you are marketing yourself or building a brand, but because the assignment attached to this level of favor requires wider impact. Access means doors that were previously locked, now open at your approach. Rooms you were excluded from now seek your presence. Conversations you were never invited to suddenly cannot happen without you. Permanence means what establishes itself in this season does not have the fragility of your former blessings. It does not depend on your performance, your perfection, or your ability to maintain it through human effort. You are not being made whole. Whole implies returning to original condition, but you are being expanded, stretched beyond your former capacity, elevated beyond your previous ceiling, entrusted with resources, authority, and responsibility that would have crushed the version of you that existed before the suffering. This is why the delay was necessary. This is why the preparation took so long. This is why you had to be broken down, stripped bare, isolated, and rebuilt from the foundation up. Because what is coming requires a completely different structure than what you had. Your former foundation could not support this weight. Your former mindset could not steward this level of favor. Your former character could not handle this degree of access without being corrupted by it. The loss trained you to hold what is coming. Every person who abandoned you created space for relationships that can actually support you at this level. Every opportunity that closed removed distractions from assignments that require your full focus. Every resource that was taken freed you from dependencies that would have become chains once favor increased. Every dream that died made room for visions so large that your former dreams now look like rough drafts, like early sketches, like incomplete thoughts you needed to release so the full revelation could come. You thought you were losing everything, but you were being emptied so you could be filled with something that would not fit into your former container. This is the return phase. But do not misunderstand what is returning. It is not your old life in better condition. It is not your former dreams with upgraded features. It is something entirely new that carries the DNA of everything you learned in the wilderness, everything you survived in isolation, everything you became through suffering. The favor manifesting now is built on the foundation of your endurance. It carries the strength you forged through pressure. It reflects the clarity you gained through loss, and it operates at a level that makes restoration look like an insult, like thinking too small, like asking for your old life back when heaven is offering you a completely different existence. This release was scheduled, not requested. You did not earn this through prayer volume or worship intensity. You did not manifest this through positive thinking or vision boards. You did not negotiate this through bargaining with heaven or making promises you hoped would move divine emotions. What is happening in your life right now was already decided before you knew to ask for it. Written into timelines that do not require your faith to activate them. Encoded into agreements that do not need your understanding to execute them. Heaven does not ask permission to repay its own. It does not conduct surveys to see if you feel ready. It does not wait for you to believe you deserve it before releasing what you are owed. You are about to experience a level of favor that may actually feel uncomfortable at first, because it will contradict every narrative you constructed about yourself during the suffering. It will violate every limitation people taught you to accept about what is possible for someone with your background, your history, your failures, your struggles. It will manifest in ways that make you question whether you are qualified, whether you can handle it, whether you deserve it. And here is what you need to understand. Your feelings about readiness are irrelevant. Your doubts about worthiness do not factor into the equation. Your fear that you might not be able to steward what is coming does not slow down the release. Because this is not about your assessment of yourself. This is about heaven's assessment of what it owes you. Resistance to receiving now would violate the process. This is critical. There will be moments when favor manifests in forms so large, so sudden, so disproportionate to your previous reality that your first instinct will be to reject it, to insist it is too much, to defer to others who you think deserve it more, to shrink back because you do not feel qualified. And if you do that, you will be interfering with a legal transaction that has already been authorized. You will be blocking a release that has already been scheduled. You will be refusing delivery of what you are legally owed. Heaven is not asking if you feel ready. It is notifying you that payment is being issued. You endured because you were assigned to, not because you are special in the way ego understands specialness, not because you are better than others, or more spiritual, or more favored, but because your assignment required endurance as a prerequisite. Your destiny included a clause that said you would survive specific levels of suffering, maintain specific standards of integrity, and outlast specific windows of opposition. You did not choose that assignment. It was written into your design before you had consciousness to protest it. And now that you have completed what was required, now that you have survived what the assignment demanded, now that you have proven you are who the documentation claimed you were, favor arrives because the operation is complete. This is not the beginning of your story. It is not even the middle. This is the transition from preparation phase to operational phase. Everything until now was qualification, testing, authentication, proving to systems that measure capacity that you can carry what comes next. The favor being released is not the reward. It is the equipment, the resources, the access, the authority, the tools you need for assignments that are about to be activated. You are not receiving blessing so you can finally relax and enjoy life. You are receiving what is necessary for the work you are about to do, for the territory you are about to take, for the impact you are about to make. Heaven does not give you favor so you can retire. It compensates you so you can operate. What is coming will feel like overflow, like abundance, like more than you need. But it is precisely calibrated to match what is required for where you are going, for what you are assigned to build, for who you are meant to become. The excess is not waste. It is margin. It is fuel. It is reserve capacity for the resistance you will face in the next phase, for the resources you will need to deploy in assignments that have not yet been revealed, for the people you will support who are still in their wilderness season, wondering if favor will ever come. This is final notice. Favor is not optional. It is not conditional. It is not dependent on your feelings about it. It was scheduled. It is being released. And the only thing you need to do is stop resisting and receive. Chosen one, you stand at the threshold of a reality most will never touch. Not because they are unworthy, but because they did not survive what you survived. They did not endure what you endured. They did not maintain what you maintained under conditions designed to strip everything away. The favor coming to you now is not the end of your story. It is the weaponization of your testimony. Everything you survived becomes evidence. Every loss you endured becomes leverage. Every tear you shed in silence becomes testimony that cannot be refuted. The world is about to witness what happens when heaven repays someone who refused to be broken. This is not closure. This is commencement. You are not graduating from the wilderness into rest. You are being deployed from preparation into purpose. The suffering installed something in you that can only be understood by those who carry similar scars. And there are people waiting for you who will not listen to anyone who has not been where you have been, who will not trust anyone who has not survived what you survived. Your pain just became your greatest qualification. Your endurance just became your highest credential. And the favor manifesting now is giving you the platform, the resources, and the authority to reach people who are still in the place you just emerged from. Do not mistake this moment for arrival. This is launch. What you thought was the end was actually the countdown. And the favor being released is fuel for a journey you have not yet been briefed on, for territory you have not yet seen, for assignments that will require everything you learned when you thought you were just trying to survive. The debt has been settled, the ledger has been balanced, but the operation is just beginning. What comes next will make your wilderness look like basic training, and you are about to discover why you had to endure that much to be trusted with this much. The favor is here, the authorization is active, and the universe is waiting to see what you do now that you have been repaid for what you endured. This is not the conclusion, chosen one. This is the commission.